I'm a big fan of detective stories. I grew up surrounded by cop books and mystery novels, and during my years of gaming, the only game within the genre that truly made me happy was LA Noire. And I'm very disappointed that Rockstar hasn't made a single attempt to expand what could be a very promising franchise. While debating on what to play next, I came across a game that I've heard good things about, and that could maybe scratch that itch. Released in 2014 and developed by Airtight Games, Murder Soul Suspect was overlooked with the amount of amazing games that were released that year. With 48 achievements and an astonishing 242 collectibles, Murder Soul Suspect is a small game that can be completed in one playthrough. What's the best way to start a story than with reports of a serial killer roaming the streets of Salem, whose signature is the drawing of a bell? And what's the best way to start that same story than being thrown out of a building and becoming a victim yourself? After getting up from a fall from a very tall building, we realize that we are not as alive as we thought, since we can see our lifeless body in the middle of the street. And to add to that, we see our killer using our own gun to put a couple of holes in us. Completely necessary. Now we are dead. With our death out of the way, we meet our also dead wife as she is near the beyond. Julia tells us that despite being dead, we are still in danger, so we need to save ourselves so we can cross the bridge. And to do that, we need to finish our unresolved issues. The police gets called to the crime scene and we see a little ghostly girl hopping around. We follow her and she teaches that our strengths in life are stronger in death and we get powers because of it. She also teaches us that if we don't fix our unresolved issues, we may get stuck here forever. And sometimes, if you do end up losing yourself, you may turn into a demon whose only purpose is to consume those lingering between life and death. This makes us assume that in order to move on, we need to find out who our killer is so we can be once more with our wife. But before we can get some more answers, the girl dips. We follow her, but eventually we reach our crime scene where the police have already set everything up. And this is the main gameplay of Murder Soul Suspect. You can interact with the world and possess and influence people to get clues to understand the crime scenes. After exploring every clue and interacting with everything possible, we finally conclude our first investigation.
The killer came here for a reason.
We enter the apartment building that we were pushed from, and inside, we start using our newly acquired powers. We can reveal traces from the past to help other ghosts, and after using reveal for the first time and getting our first collectible, we get As we keep investigating the place, we find a ghost who doesn't know how or why she died and doesn't even know where her body is, and since we are a detective, we agree to help her find some clues to solve this. We enter the apartment of an old couple who the ghost thinks are the culprit behind their death. After possessing and reading the mind of the old man, we get After investigating the old couple and obtaining every clue, we put the pieces together and discover that the ghost was throwing parties late at night to the point where the old couple could barely rest. And one day they had enough and buried her in the quarry. By telling the girl what happened, we finally set her soul free. While exploring the building, we enter another apartment where we ask a ghost on why he is stalking a sleeping kid.
Hey, you enjoy scaring kids?
This little girl cost me everything. It was supposed to be a simple job. Easy money.
On the way to the next floor, we find our very first demon, and after fainting him for a while, we finally exorcise him. We keep exploring the apartments until we find our 10th collectible and get
I don't know. Party, maybe? Well, we could drive to Boston. Drive to Boston?
And in this same apartment, we learn how to use another one of our newly acquired powers.
Logistically speaking, working that out, you want to take your
We finally reach the apartment of the crime, and while searching for clues of what happened to us, we find the last clue for one of the side stories. After finding every clue of the altercation, we find that we interrupted the Bell Killer from going after his next victim, and while she managed to get away, we took her place, which means that we need to find her so we can find why was the killer there in the first place.
Out the window. Gunned me down in the street and you didn't even check for witnesses? Like you're untouchable.
We need to head to the church, and on our way, we use another one of our newly acquired powers to remove part of something that's blocking the way. On the beach right near the church, we find another ghost that doesn't know what happened to her. She doesn't remember how she got there or what even happened to her, so we start searching for clues. After we find all of them and discover that she was saving people right before her boat turned, making her drown, we set her soul free. At the end of the beach, we find our 25th collectible. We finally enter the church and we discover that the girl that fled from the apartment came here to ask for shelter. And while searching for her, we find the cat and we possess him. Possessing the cat allows us to travel to the attic through the courtyard, and in here we find the girl. But before speaking with her, we find the last clue for another of the side stories. As we try to possess the girl to learn what she knows about what happened in the apartment, she immediately kicks us out of her body. We learn that she's a medium and that she can see dead people. We learn that the killer was probably looking for her mother, who, just like her, is also a medium. Sadly, she doesn't know where she is. She only knows she was working with the cop trying to find out the truth about the Bell Killer. She also tells us that she found a note from her in the apartment telling her to find the book at the police station. She stormed off, leaving us without a single clue of where she might have went. So after thinking for a while, we remember about the book in the police station. We start making our way to the police station, and on the way, we get our collectible number 50. On our way, we find a gas station, and we see a ghost crying because he thinks he's the reason both him and his friends died. After investigating what happened and discovering that he wasn't to blame, his soul is set free. We finally reach the police station, and our first task is to see if there are new leads about our murder. We didn't learn anything special besides the name of the girl from the apartment, and the fact that she is currently in custody right here in the station. While going to find her, we find a trace of Baxter, one of the cops who hated us for our past, and we learn more about his life, getting us.
Hey, Baxter, you still relying on that wizard lady?
You know I ain't into all that spiritual crap.
And while exploring the station, we reach another collectible milestone. We finally find Joy, the girl, inside the interrogation room, and we learn that her mother was actually helping Baxter on his case against the Bell Killer. And since we need our mother's notebook that is inside the station, we decide to help her escape. We tamper with a camera in the room and she manages to leave, and after helping her get across the station onto the second floor where the offices are, we investigate Rex's. Rex being our brother-in-law, and that gets us.
Healed it, buddy. That sickness she carried in her brain, you made it tolerable.
We reach Baxter's office, where after snooping around for a while, we find the notebook we came here for. So now it's time to help Joy escape the station without getting spotted, but before that, we find the last clue for another of the side stories. We go back to the first room we started and Joy slips out of the window by herself instead of wanting to team up for her own safety. We find Joy outside trying to make a run for it, but we chase her and we decide that it's best to do this together. After searching for answers within the book, we decide to go to the cemetery since our mother thinks that her last case was connected to the Bell Killer. On the way to the cemetery, we reach another collectible milestone. At the entrance of the cemetery, we find a ghost observing a couple. And apparently it's her ex-boyfriend and she thinks that he was cheating on her. After possessing the couple, we learn that the only reason they met it was because she took her own life, leaving those two to know each other. At least this sets her soul free. We enter the cemetery where we sense a ghost stalking us. We finally meet with Joy, who's searching for clues about what happened on the last case. After investigating, we learned that a body was washed up in the river and ended up there. And in a notebook, we learned that the victim name was Sophia, which happens to be the same ghostly girl who was stalking us before. And look at that, she was there, staring at us from far away. We go after her, but since there are demons around, we need to go carefully. So, we dispose of them so we can travel freely. We finally find her inside one of the mausoleums, but she teleports away, which makes us want to learn how to do it as well, which we do. We keep chasing after the ghostly girl across the entire cemetery. We finally find her near the river, right in front of a tree. And by touching her arm, we can see her memories of the events, and we see that the Bell Killer, well, killed her. In a very awful way. And before he did so, he drew his symbol on her arm. We need to go back to Joy, and on the way, we find the last clue for one of the side stories. And then we return to Joy.
Ronan, I heard screams and it's good that you're okay.
We compare notes on what we both learn and we discover that Sophia, the ghostly girl, mentioned the contract before dying. And another one of the Bell Killer victim is in a psychiatric hospital and keeps mentioning something about a contract. Since that's our only clue, that's our next stop. Before going there, we explore the city a bit and we find the last collectible related to Ronan's life.
All those street brawls. It's amazing I lived as long as I did.
While exploring the city, we reach another collectible milestone. We finally enter the psychiatric hospital. We do a bit of detective work to find out where Iris, the survivor of the Bell Killer, is. And to proceed, just like in the police station, we need to help Joy traverse around the hospital without being spotted. We manage to do so very easily, and while exploring, we find the last clue for another of the side stories. We finally reach Iris's room where she is already in an awful state. We attempt to possess her, but just like Joy, she manages to push us out. We investigate their room and learn that both her and her twin sister were mediums that were captured by the Bell Killer. And while Rose helped Iris escape from him, she wasn't so lucky and ended up being burned alive. And after we learned this, we also learned that she wasn't crazy. She was simply being possessed by the ghost of her twin sister who was trying to protect her all this time. So now we need to help both Joy and Iris escape from the hospital. We finally take them to safety and ask Iris what she knows about the contracts with the demons, to what she simply tells us that all she knows is that the Bell Killer wanted them to admit that they have made one. While we are out here, we remember seeing the stake where Rose was burned alive in one of the pamphlets inside Joy's notebook, which means we need to go to the museum.
That's it. All right, look, get Iris to the church, make sure that she's safe. I'll catch up with you later. Go.
We enter the museum and we see that the place is crawling with demon portals. That's always a good sign. We investigate the museum and we discover that the Bell Killer is using the same method people did use to kill the witches way back in the days. We just need to find out why are the victims being treated as witches. We explore further and decide to go to the second floor, and on our way we find Joy trying to break in instead of staying in the church with Iris as we told her. We reach a room full of artifacts, but before we investigate those, we snoop around and find the last clue for yet another of the side stories. We go back on track and investigate the artifacts and reach the conclusion that the Bell Killer is killing the mediums because he thinks they are witches. And the only person we know, so far, who has showed interest in mediums is Baxter. So now we need to find out what's his involvement in this whole scenario.
Alright, found the killer's symbol.
Since Baxter is our prime suspect, we decide to go back to the church, but when we get there, the whole place is a crime scene. And just like us, the cop doesn't know where Baxter is. We reach the courtyard and we see that Iris is dead, and the reason, she was crushed by the Bell Killer. Right next to her body is her and Rose's ghost, and she reassures us that her death wasn't our fault before being set free. Back inside the church, we find a room full of bodies, so after analyzing everything, we learn that the Bell Killer knew that Iris was in the church and came here for her. She ran to this same room where plenty of people were, and they were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. We go to the attic, but on the way, we see the priest who took Joy in, also dead, and that he was killed protecting Iris. We then come to the conclusion that the target was Joy all along, and that Iris was just a bonus. We then find the key that is for the Judgment House that we assume it's the killer's hideout, so that's our next stop. Since Joy was captured while trying to enter the church, we are on our own. Before we enter the Judgment House, we find the last clue for another of the side stories. We then find the last graffiti.
Things that blew in this town.
We enter the Judgment House, and at the entrance is a police car that, well, gotta be Baxter's. Inside the house, we find the last collectible related to the killer. While exploring, we find a room that's very similar to the one at the police station with plenty of information about the killer. And we discover that across several years, there are plenty of murders alike, which means there's more than one killer. On the next room, we find the last of Cassandra's notebook, Cassandra being Joy's mother.
The vibrations I'm getting from this house are off the charts.
As we go further into the house, we find the last piece of information about the witch trials. We find the last of Julia's notes. And we reach the basement and see that Baxter is dead. And not only that, his ghost is here with us. We then finally learn that Baxter wasn't the killer. He was in fact investigating the Bell Killer just like us, but with Cassandra. We tell Baxter to go and pick up Cassandra so she can be safe while we keep investigating further. In here we find the last of Salem's history artifacts. We reach further down the basement, and while we investigate what happened, we find the last collectible of the game and the last clue of the very last side story. We start investigating what happened in this basement all those years ago, and we reach the conclusion that Abigail, the little ghost girl we met right when we died, is the real Bell Killer. We reach Baxter's body once more when we hear his radio and we learn that Rex, together with Joy, are missing. So that would mean that Abigail has taken control over Rex, and since she's going back where it all began, she took them to her place of death, the museum. We reach the museum where we find the possessed Rex who was about to kill Joy. We interrupt the hanging by possessing Joy's body and using her scream that expels Abigail from Rex's body. We rushed towards Abigail, and by touching her, we learned about what happened all those years ago. She was framed as a witch even though she had nothing to do with having powers. We then learned that Abigail was using Rex to kill Ronan. But that doesn't make much sense since Rose's original killer had blue eyes, like Baxter. And then we finally learned that Abigail ends up killing all of the ones she possesses, especially if they are starting to get too close to the truth. And that's when we learned that we were the ones who actually killed Sophia. Abigail summons a portal of demons who starts pushing us in, but if we are going to die for good, she's coming with us. Luckily, we start dragging her down, and the demons prefer her over us. And now, we can cross the bridge towards Julia. Although short, Murder Soul Suspect scratched the itch I had for a game with detective elements. I truly enjoyed examining the clues and trying to discover for myself what really started the story. Reading all of the collectibles added a ton of lore to the game, which was a very nice touch, especially since despite having so many collectibles, they all served a purpose. The small side stories, although unrelated, were also very enjoyable to experience. They added an extra layer of eeriness to the game. The main story itself was quite solid, but I couldn't really feel much towards the characters because there wasn't much to connect with. Most of their lives are shown through flashbacks tied to the collectibles, which are optional. And this is a bit disappointing because I really enjoyed Ronan, but the characters overall lack depth. The game itself was fun, though sometimes a bit clunky, especially with the movement or during transition from cutscenes to gameplay. Overall, as a very short game that doesn't overstay its welcome, it was a very pleasant surprise. If you watched my whole journey, thank you so much, and I hope to see you on the next one.